Hi, it's Dre Griggs of the City of Wisdom. Today we answer the question, what is the single biggest mistake people make when it comes to estate planning? Estate planning is basically the cousin of retirement planning. If we do everything right with your retirement, you're going to have assets that you need to figure out what to do with when you pass. Let's see if you can guess what the biggest mistake is based off a couple of case studies. These are going to be celebrity case studies I'm going to read off, and the reason we use them is because your estate is public records unless you set it up in a way that keeps it from being public records. So let's go through a couple of them. The first one is we're going to look at Barry White. So he died in 2003 and says he was separated but not divorced from his second wife, who inherited everything. His live-in girlfriend of several years and 9 children received nothing. And so the legal battle ensued with White's girlfriend and his daughter Denise and son Daryl filing lawsuits. What was the mistake that Barry White made? Example number 2, where it's the same issue, and hopefully you'll be able to recognize it. So Heath Ledger, the guy in Batman who played that phenomenal Joker, he had died at 28 years old in 2008. It says that he left everything to his parents and 3 sisters, right? Doesn't sound like a big problem there. Well, what was the problem with that plan? The issue was he had a 2-year-old daughter, Matilda, and her mother, who was an actress, Michelle Williams. He didn't leave them anything. Now, the good news in this story is Heath Ledger's family ultimately gave everything to his daughter, the entire estate. But what was that one big mistake that was made? There's also a story of Marlon Brando. It says when he died in 2004, he basically left his $26 million estate to his producer and a couple of other friends and associates. But the problem was his housekeeper said that he had intended to leave her his house. Now, we don't know how many millions of dollars the house was worth at the time, but we do know that she sued the estate for the value of the home and for $2 million in punitive damages. Long story short, they ended up settling outside of court. I believe she settled for maybe $125,000. So what was the big mistake? Now I'll give you one more story of this same big mistake. So Michael Jackson, it says that when he passed, he had an estate of roughly $500 million. And he had set up a revocable living trust. And then the plan for the trust was to be able to divvy out his assets to his children and his mother. But when he died, his trust wasn't actually funded. So none of his assets were actually retitled into the trust, moved into the trust. The trust wasn't made the beneficiary of any of his assets. So all of his assets, all $500 million, was outside of the trust, even though he had set up and intended to fund the trust. So out of these 4 examples, what do you find as the common issue in each of these estate plans? And the biggest mistake that people make with their estate plan is they don't actually go back and review their estate plan every 2 to 5 years. And the big thing is most people think estate planning is a set it and forget it. For most people, what we'll do is we'll sit there and say, okay, do I have my will in place? Check. Do I have my power of attorneys in case I have health issues or become incapacitated? Check. Do I have my trust in place? Do I have an irrevocable or revocable trust? And for those that don't know, revocable means that I can put the assets in the trust and I can take the assets out of the trust. Depending on how I feel, I can revoke the privileges. And irrevocable is just as it sounds. You cannot revoke the privileges. Once the assets go into an irrevocable trust, the trust and the way it's designed is what's going to happen with those assets. I don't get to decide as the grantor, the person who puts the assets in the trust, I don't get to decide what happens to them anymore. The trust owns the assets. So you'll sit there and say, I got everything set up, checked off all the boxes. I no longer need to think about my estate plan. But what happens is you have life events that happen. I'm going to go over some of these life events that can help you say, all right, I need to revisit my estate plan. So for some people like Heath Ledger, if you have children, then you should revisit your trust. Whether you have to design your trust in a way because your children are under 18, that whoever is going to be their guardian needs to have access to certain funds. You need to make sure that your children are able to maintain a certain lifestyle. Now it's becoming more common that we have laws in place to where you can leave assets to your favorite dog or favorite cat. People do that all the time. Well, if your favorite dog or your cat passes before you, well, what happens to your assets? You didn't update your trust. So now your assets are going to this person who's going to take care of your pet, and then the pet isn't here anymore. We were married, or we remarried, or we had a family member that took care of us in our time of need. And then what happens? We don't update the documents. All of our assets go to our ex-wife or our ex-husband, and we don't get to reward or at least show our appreciation to the person who was with us in our last days, who took care of us, who helped us throughout all these rough times, because we didn't update the will. We had the set it and forget it, where in our mind we said, yes, I have a will, I have a trust, I have a power of attorney. I don't need to think about that anymore. But the reality is you have to look periodically at your will, your estate plan, to make sure it's up to date with what's actually going on in your current life. So some life events that might be a good trigger to remind us to take a look at our estate plan naturally would be if we have marriage or divorce, if there's a birth or death. Anytime someone that's close to us passes, or anytime someone is born that immediately is very important to us, we should take a look at our estate plan and decide, should I update it based on this life event? And one often overlooked reason to review your estate plan is just changing tax laws. We know, for example, your lifetime exclusions have increased, where it's about 13.6 million currently. But we also know that half of that, where we know that there was an increase under the Obama administration, there's an increase under the Trump administration, and we know that the Trump administration portion is scheduled to end in 2025. So does that mean I should be reviewing my estate plan if there's changes in the laws? Of course. For example, if you have a bypass trust where your estate plan documents fill out one trust up to 13.6 million, and that's supposed to go without the death tax, and then the rest goes into this other trust in 2025, at least unless Congress does something between now and then, well, half of that is going to go away. So anytime there's a change in the laws, is normally a great time to ask your financial planner and your estate planner, hey, what does this do to my estate? Do I need to change where my assets are located? Should I move something now so that I can take advantage of this benefit, or should I wait because it's going to be better when the new laws go into place? If you're worried about your estate plan and would like to reach out so that you can have a conversation complimentary and see what we can do to optimize your estate plan, all you have to do is go to obsidianwisdom.com/wealthy to learn more. Just allowing yourself to consider that situation makes it more than worthwhile. What happens for most of us is we get pretty busy. Life happens. We're working, things change, they come and go. And in our mind, we'll say, okay, I'll get to that later. But the reality is none of us know how much sand is in our hourglass. I'm not here to spook you or scare you or anything, but just imagine in your mind, if my assets went to the people that is currently listed in my will and my trust and estate, would that make me happy or would it have me worried? And if it would have you worried, then you need to go review that estate plan. And while you're keeping your document up to date, it's not the funnest conversation to have, but you should have a handful of people that know where your will is. It's well documented that Florence Griffith Joyner, who most of us know as FloJo, who was an Olympian, that no one could find her will. So her husband and her mother, they were arguing over whether the mother got the house and she was supposed to live rent-free, or the husband got the house and they couldn't find the will. We should let people know where the document is. Whether or not when your will is made, you have your attorney, you have your financial planner, you have your accountant, you have someone who has that document that you trust, okay, that's great. But it may be worth letting the family know. Just kind of sitting them all together, or at least giving them a copy of it, having that discussion, because we don't want them arguing in court. There are so many stories of families arguing in court, and whether or not they're doing it on purpose, like everybody knew what that person wanted, or whether they're hoping that no one finds the will and they're just trying to get one over on everyone, or whatever the reason is, the more copies of your will that are available, the more likely it is that the judge is going to believe that this is what you wanted to be done with your assets. So when you keep it up to date and then it has everything and you have these life events to where the judge doesn't have to sit there and say, well, it looks like this will was made 5 years ago and there was a divorce 2 years ago. What do I think the person intended? Because it's very possible that people could be divorced and they're still best friends and they want all their assets to go to that person. And then they'll sit there and say, okay, well, this person had a child or they have their kids, and for whatever reason, that kid is irresponsible or they did something and you literally did not want them to have any of the assets. Everyone in the family knew, you told everyone in the family, but you didn't update the document, and the judge is sitting there and the judge is like, did you really intend for your children not to get your assets because, right, that's not as common. And so the judge might sit there and say, I just don't know if that was the intention. There's nothing written here. I'm just going to give it out to each of the children equally. Right? You just don't want to have that conversation. And I'm shortening that conversation because we're talking about a very long period of time, a lot of court battles, a lot of attorney fees, sometimes over a span of several years, even decades, to where we're having this conversation and the judge is trying to figure out, is that what this person wanted to be done with their stuff? And it could end up causing severe damage to your family's relationships. And most of us, that's not what our intention is. Most of us, we care so much about our family. We love our family. We want our family to get along. We want them to be able to move on and come closer together in this time of loss. But a lot of the times it doesn't work out that way because we don't have the estate plan in place and because we haven't updated the documents regularly enough that the judge can just take it at face value. The judge doesn't have to make any interpretations, and then that causes those arguments and it leaves that opening for those issues to be created. So ideally, for you to avoid the biggest estate planning mistake that I see, there's 3 things that you want to do. Number 1 is you should be reviewing your estate plan probably every 3 to 5 years. Number 2 is you want to work with professionals. It's very important for you to keep open communication between your financial planner and your estate planner because your financial planner has an idea of what the assets are and your estate attorney is going to have ideas of how the documents are written. And we sometimes have to update the assets because if we have more houses or we sold the house and then we moved, the attorney is sitting there and they may not know. So when you have that communication of where the assets are and what we're doing, we can then have the document updated to reflect our assets. So again, the judge isn't sitting there having to figure out if this document is your last will and testament, where you have these different assets and they're like, I don't know, where you have a different marriage or you have different kids where your life situation doesn't match the estate plan, and then the judge has to fill in those gaps. Number 3 is having a checklist is a great way and a simple way for you to stay on top of your assets. So you can keep track of your assets, you can keep track of your beneficiaries, and you can also keep track of your health directives and your power of attorneys, where all these documents are updated based on whether people are living or dying, whether people are married or divorced, whether we're having new births in our family, whether we have changing dynamics in our relationships, whether we're selling some of our assets, maybe we're selling our business or our home, whatever that looks like, we were able to keep that checklist. We're like, okay, I need to go and review my estate plan because my assets have changed. My life situations, my circumstances has changed. As always, I'm thankful for your time. If you found value in this video, I ask for you to simply like and subscribe so you can continue receiving valuable insights on how to create your own wealthy retirement system. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.